Welcome to a Fresh Story podcast. This season, we're digging into all things divorce. We'll be discussing the ins, the outs, the nitty-gritty, all that stuff we don't talk about. Well, we're going to talk about it. Join us for everything you've always wanted to know about divorce, but were afraid to ask. Remember, you're not alone. Let's dive into divorce together. Hello, Olivia here. It's no secret that one of the questions we get a lot at Fresh Starts is how we can support our children through the transition to divorce. On this episode of A Fresh Story, we're covering everything you've ever wanted to know about children and divorce, including child custody arrangements, co-parenting tips, and how to support your kids through the divorce transition. Some of the questions covered in this episode are: what are the different types of child custody arrangements, and what factors are considered in determining custody? What are some common issues or disputes that arise regarding child custody, and how can they be resolved? What are some tips for talking to my children about the divorce? And how can co-parenting challenges be addressed and managed effectively? Stay tuned to hear from experts such as Arisha Smolarski, co-parenting coach, therapist, certified mediator, and author of Cooperative Co-Parenting for Secure Kids, the Attachment Theory Guide to Raising Kids in Two Homes. Mara Bernstein, founder of Divorce Different. She's an accredited collaborative divorce lawyer, divorce mediator, and divorce consultant. Erica Miller, founder of Connected Minds NYC, clinical psychologist and children's therapist, and Alex Phillips, therapist and founder of Your Hood Therapy. Remember, you can find much more info on divorceguide.co, divorcemonth.com, and freshstartsregistry.com. You can get in touch with any of these experts on freshstartsregistry.com/experts. Don't forget, you're not alone in this process. We're all here for you. So let's get started.
Hi, I'm Mara Bernstein, divorce attorney, certified divorce mediator, accredited collaborative divorce attorney with offices in Boca Raton, virtually throughout the state of Florida, and also licensed in New York State.
So we get this question a lot. We have a lot of moms. I personally have a lot of women who message me. What are the different types of child custody arrangements, and what factors are considered in determining custody? Now, obviously, this is like a huge question. I would love if you could just, define what the different types of child custody are. I had no idea, and I was a child of divorce, and I had no idea. So what does that look like? And then what are kind of the overarching key factors that go into custody?
Okay. So again, it's different in every state, and in different states, we call it different things. So I practiced in New York City for many years. We called it custody. I practice in Florida right now primarily, and we call it time sharing. So there are two aspects to parenting. In the state of Florida, we have something called a parenting plan, and you probably had it when you were divorced. And it really talks about two separate issues. One is decision making, right? How do we make decisions on behalf of the children? So generally, it's joint decision making, okay? So if you want to register your child for an extracurricular activity and you expect the other person to pay, you need to have some mutual agreement. Okay, you're shaking your head because you've been through this.
No, I understand. Yeah, and I think that this is all the stuff that people don't realize when it comes down to it. Yeah, and I'm laughing because I'm in New York and I have a friend going through divorce right now in Florida, and so I'm fascinated by the difference in the language too, custody versus timeshare.
And I actually prefer the time sharing versus custody.
Yeah. It's gentler.
It's gentler, and it's not like the child is a possession or some sort of property. So there's the decision making piece, whether it's joint, whether it's ultimate. The court says, you know what, this other parent does not have the ability to make decisions. That's very, very rare. So that's one aspect of it. And the other aspect of it is time sharing. What is it going to look like? And in fact, the law just changed in Florida that there's a presumption of 50-50. So off the bat, each parent gets 50-50 regardless. And what is the paramount concern that the courts have and we as lawyers look at is the best interest of the child, right? And that's in every state. That's across the board. So if it's 50-50, what is the 50-50 going to look like? It really is dependent upon the age of the child, whether the child has special needs, whether there's more than one child. So, for kids who are older, where they need more consistency in terms of, maybe teenagers, it could be a week on, a week off, 1 week with mom, 1 week with dad. It could be Monday, Tuesday with mom, Wednesday, Thursday with dad, and alternating weekends. So you could be as creative as possible, but you really have to look at what are the needs of this particular family? What are the needs of the child?
Yeah, and something I like to remind people, and I've talked about this with a couple of our other experts, is it's not set in stone. Right? Like, I think that's something a lot of women come to me and they're panicked, right? They're like, I'm not going to be with my child this amount of time, right? But this is like, your custody agreements grow and change as your children grow and change, correct?
Always modifiable. That's one thing that people really need to know. Anything that has to do with children is modifiable because children's needs change. Parents change their employment situations. So it's always modifiable. And, listen, divorce is really, really difficult. And my expression is you have to love your kids more than you hate your soon to be your ex. And that's the bottom line. So if you could work through it and be flexible, a parenting plan is something that ultimately, hopefully you put in a drawer and you never look at it again.
It's really helpful. It's really helpful. And there's obviously a lot of specialists and experts that can help people with parenting plans, not just your lawyer, but divorce coaches and mediators and all of those people. If somebody is going through a divorce or they're considering divorce, Mara, and they're overwhelmed and don't even know where to begin, what would be like if they call you, what would be like the first thing they could say when they pick up the phone? Just like, I'm considering divorce or I'm looking for a divorce. Like, what do people say when they call you and they would like your services?
I'm thinking about divorce. How do I prepare for it? My spouse just told me he or she wants a divorce. What do I do next? And I am a very big advocate and proponent of building your community, working with people like you, working with a child therapist, working with your own therapist, working with a forensic accountant. I mean, the law is only one part of the divorce. You cannot rely on your divorce attorney to be all these things because it's, look at the divorce in the middle and all the different spokes. The law, financial, social, emotional, your children. So you really need to build a team and make it really comprehensive so that you could meet your goals at the end of the day. And working with a divorce coach or a therapist is really important because you really have to define what you want your life to look like. So your platform is so perfect. It's so holistic.
Oh, thank you.
Comprehensive. I really love it. And I'm glad to be a part of it.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. And that's exactly why we built it. Cause I had to build my own hype team of people. I had no idea, right? I knew I needed to start with a mediator. By the way, I went through 5 different divorce lawyers, right? So it's like, you also have to find someone that understands, that works with you, that can take your voice. But I remember, and this is why I love what you said, because I loved the one I ended up with was she's a woman and she was fantastic, but she wasn't there to support my emotional needs because that's not her job. Right. No. And she's busy. She has other clients and stuff like that. So I agree. And that's exactly why we are careful with who we have on the platform and who we, wanted to make sure we put up there. Cause you do need to come back time and again to build that hype team of people.
Absolutely. You're right.
You're right. Any wise words for anybody going through a divorce that you could just leave them with?
I would say that it's really important to modulate, expectations. So there's a difference between reasonable expectations and realistic expectations. it's reasonable to expect that your soon-to-be ex is going to act in a certain way, but is that really realistic? So I think that's a really good jumping off point for people. There's so much more I have to say. I have a lot of words of wisdom.
Yeah.
For this particular
Yeah.
episode, realistic versus reasonable expectations in terms of the outcome of your divorce and who your soon-to-be ex is.
Yeah.
They're not going to change, especially now when you're getting divorced.
Yeah. Yeah. And I try to remind people of that you still have a relationship with them. It's just that the relationship changes, and transitions. Well, we'll have to have you come back on to talk about all other things divorce. Thank you so much, Mara.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Arisha Smolarski, and I am a therapist, a co-parenting coach, and a mediator. I've been working for 10 plus years with individuals, couples, and co-parents, helping them navigate different stages of their relationship. I've also been a musician since I was a kid, which has definitely informed the way that I view and look at communication as verbal as well as nonverbal. I am a co-parent. I have a daughter who's 12 years old, and I live in Los Angeles with my cat and with my daughter. And I've recently written a book which will be hitting the shelves January 2nd. It's called Cooperative Co-Parenting for Secure Kids, the Attachment Theory Guide to Raising Kids in Two Homes. So I blend my experience and my expertise and attachment theory to help co-parents along their co-parenting journey.
So we have a question for you as the co-parenting expert here. And it goes like this. Hi there, Fresh Starts. I'm a newly divorced parent, and I share custody with my ex. How can co-parenting challenges be addressed and managed effectively? Okay, what do you say here?
Yeah, well, there are definitely a lot of challenges in the co-parenting relationship. So some of the ones that I see come up most often in my office are based around communication, scheduling, and having different co-parenting styles and values. So communication is a key element in any relationship. And the co-parenting relationship is just as valid as a marriage, a friendship, or dating. So when I'd like to, talk to co-parents about looking at their relationship as if it were a business or a nonprofit whose sole goal right now is to raise a child together. It's no longer about the two of you succeeding. It's about your child thriving. So just shifting the focus to prioritizing your kids is going to help immediately in the tone and the interactions of your communications. So here are a few tips that I like to offer. The first one is really being respectful, considerate, and cordial. So, when you bring in a sense of appreciation or acknowledgement of the efforts that your co-parent is making, or that you value what they bring to your child, that sets a tone of respect and will decrease defensiveness. Also, your kid really wants to feel that their parents are working together. And that helps them, feel safe and secure. The second one is being brief and concise in all of your communication. So bullet points are your friend, and really sticking to one topic at a time. And that topic should be your kids and that one topic that you're discussing. Stick to the who, what, where, and when. You don't want interactions to be about your feelings, about issues from the past, about your anger or resentment, or about blaming your co-parent for not doing something the way that you would want them to do it. So again, stick to the facts. Asking questions and bringing in a spirit of generosity and curiosity really can shift the tone in any kind of interaction. When you bring in assumptions or accusations, it immediately will set off a defensive response. It's going to make you sound critical or judgmental or blamey, which never will, lead to a good outcome for you. So you want to create these win-wins. And when you ask questions like, what do you think? Or I'm curious to know more, or please give me more details on that. You're allowing your co-parent to feel like their voice matters, that they're included in the decision, And that only will decrease the defensiveness or shutdown response. And the fourth one I'd like to offer is one around boundaries and, responding in an appropriate amount of time where you respect your own boundaries, you hold those, as well as respecting the other person's. So when you respond in an appropriate amount of time, that could be, letting your co-parent know when you can respond. So let's say your co-parent is like sending you 5 texts and you're like, feeling overwhelmed. You just want to kind of shut down, turn the phone off and never respond. You just feel angry. Instead, you can send a thumbs up. Got it. I'll let you know by Friday at 5 p.m. This holds that boundary. Or if you need a response and your co-parent may not be good at responding to you, you can say in your text or email, please let me know by a certain amount of time. And that really holds that frame of respect while being boundaried. So those are the main communication tips that I'd like to offer. The other big challenge is scheduling, right? So this is where I have this system where co-parents create business meetings. You want to think about, again, here we are, we're in a business relationship. So have business meetings where you can plan ahead. You can bring up any kind of schedule issues that come up. You can bring up issues that relate to your kid. You can bring up any kind of concerns that you may be having in a set place where you can set an agenda. There are no surprises. Everyone has time to talk about what their feelings are, what their concerns are in a structured way. It's a meeting. So the other thing, though, you want to stick to your co-parenting plan. Get a co-parenting plan, work with a mediator or co-parenting coach or parent coordinator to get your schedule in place and stick to it as best as possible. But of course, you're going to bring in flexibility and generosity when those scheduling needs come up, a funeral or an event that comes up. So having these business meetings can be really helpful to navigate that challenge. And then having different values and parenting styles. This can bring up a lot of feelings for co-parents. They want their co-parent to do things the way they think it should be done, and it brings up a lot of conflict. But what happens is that ends up putting the kids in the middle. So you don't want to put your kids in the middle because all that does is inappropriately places them in roles that they should not be in. When you ask your kid, like, whose house do you want to go to for Christmas? Or, what's dad doing? Who's dad dating these days? Or asking them to take on feelings or, talking to them too much about your feelings or making them feel guilty for loving or wanting to spend time with their other parent or saying negative things about, their other parent. Oh, he doesn't know how to, cook very well. So he's only feeding you junk food, right? That just makes the child feel bad. It makes them feel bad about themselves. It makes them feel unseen. And they start to develop negative beliefs about themselves. So putting a kid in the middle is one of the key things that actually harms a kid long term. Yeah. So you want to be really careful about communicating and interacting in a way that presents a united front, even if you disagree with your co-parent.
Yeah.
And instead of fighting for the name of consistency, you help your child navigate the differences. When a child doesn't feel alone in these differences, they can learn really valuable, life skills. They can learn flexibility. They can learn that there are different values in different situations, like at their friends' houses or at school or later on at work, right? So you can help them make sense of the differences, understand their feelings so they can know what to expect, and instead navigate their two environments more with a sense of ease and flexibility. And they feel safe talking to you about it. So that's so important, is really just leaning in and connecting to your kid to help them feel seen, understood, and navigate these differences. So, and the last thing that I always like to share with co-parents is the only thing you really can control is what's going on in your own home. So be consistent in your own home. Follow your own values, talk about them, teach your kid in the way that you want to. They're going to take those in, and they're going to take in those of their co-parent. All that is going to help them later on as they grow, develop their own values. And so focus in on what you can do in your own
Where were you 30 years ago is my first question. And second of all, I was going to say, I'm laughing to myself, like, you should write a book. I'm so excited about your book. I think what you're saying is so important. And I mean, we're going to obviously, your book is so necessary. Every divorced parent needs to read it. Actually, any parent really probably needs to read it, right? Because it's really about communication styles too. You know, I would love for you to just talk for a moment about the power and the empowerment of using somebody like you, right, like a co-parenting coach, where you would fit into this relationship, especially with like a newly divorced, maybe very hot, emotionally relationship, you know, not in a positive way, negative way, you know, where you would fit in there.
So I do work primarily, I love actually working with co-parenting teams, not just the individuals, because you get a sense of the interaction. So I bring in my, you know, I've been working with relationships for so long and I really love relationships. And I feel like understanding why and how and where do I, what my triggers are, can really be helpful in helping co-parents navigate this new relationship. So, you know, I help parents understand that they need to say goodbye to the old relationship so they can say hello to the new one. And part of that means that your co-parent is no longer your go-to person. They're no longer your person, actually. They're just they are your child's parent, which is an amazing role, but they're not your person anymore. And so helping co-parents make that distinction and helping them instead acknowledge, like, you know, the ways in which their co-parent is a good parent and how they're, you know, really important to their child can help shift the focus from it's about me and you and about the past and the hurt and the grief to it's about my kid. And then, so that sets the tone of being able to identify what really matters, helping them understand what their values are in parenting. And actually, I find that when parents do this, there's a lot more overlap than they realize. And the little things about like food and, you know, even schedules around bedtime and all that, not that that's little, it's really important to have consistency, but the way that you navigate it and talk about it, if parents can get on the same page, that they're like on the same page, it can really help them find more cooperation. And I find that helping co-parents understand what their attachment styles are. So I bring in a lot of attachment theory in my book because I think that really can help take away blame and helps co-parents have more empathy and understanding and compassion for themselves as well as for their co-parent. And often a lot of the triggers and a lot of the things and, you know, conflict that comes up preceded this relationship. It preceded even the romantic one. So when co-parents have this, it allows us to really fine-tune the communication needs in such a way that they're not triggering exactly the reaction that they don't want to have.
Yeah.
So that can feel really empowering.
I love that. And, you know, we talk so much here about like the divorce is just a transition of a relationship, right? Mm-hmm. And so I think that you say so much, you know, you talk all about that in the book and how you have to just transition that type of romantic best friend, partner relationship to this is your child's other parent, right? And I think what I love and I want to end on a really high note is how you reframe this concept of like your children are in the other household and they're doing different things and have different values to a beautiful way to see the world, right? And everybody has different values and everybody has different ways of doing things. So could you just end with that, like, and where that kind of stemmed from of like, it's okay that we have different thoughts on things, even if it's your co-parent?
I mean, the idea actually came from, you know, having to deal with this in my own personal co-parenting relationship. You know, when we divorced, my co-parent started to become more engaged in a value that was not something that we had ever talked about, that never came up between us. And it was, you know, a big part of his life. And so I had to sit with this in a real big way because it was very contrary to the way that we had, previously thought about raising our kid. And it was a big change. I was like, who is this person? And at first I was very resistant and I was like, no, like this is not happening. And through talking to other people, it actually helped me realize like I can help my child develop more perspective on the world. And I started to talk to her about it in a very neutral way with listening to her. Like, how is it for you to hear your dad talk about it in this way and me talk about it in this way? And I didn't ever minimize his values or belief systems because that was just going to make, at first obviously it's a mess and I was navigating and I made my mistakes and stepped on toes and all that. And I was like, no. I noticed my kid just shutting down, be like, I don't know. And I was like, that's not good for her. I got to figure this out in a better way. And so through doing it, I realized that my child actually is able to talk about it now, years later, from her own perspective. It's not her dad's or mine. She's 12 now, so she's moving into that age where she's starting to think about the world or starting to think about belief structures or values. And it just came up actually in the car the other day. She was talking about death. I believe, so she went in on this and I was like, wow, like this kid actually is starting to, is her own person. And so I feel like that's where it all started, was through my own experience of having to navigate that.
I love that. And it's such a, people culturally tend to look at divorce as such a negative, right? But there's so many beautiful life lessons that come from it. So I love that. If somebody's listening to this and they're like, oh my gosh, I need your help. Obviously you're at Fresh Starts and you're still you work virtually, you work nationally with clients.
Yes. So I work, I do therapy for clients who are in California. I do coaching for co-parents who are anywhere in the world. So you can, reach out to me via Instagram at Cooperative Co-Parenting, or you can find me on the web at my website, arishasmolarski.com, and reach out. Even if you have a question, I'm available. I'd love to help. And, it's not easy. So having support is the first big, amazing step that you can do to help your child thrive through this divorce. You don't have to do it alone.
No, and you are always sharing such great tips on your Instagram and your social media. So definitely go give Arisha a follow. Thank you so much, Arisha.
Thank you, Olivia, for having me.
So my name's Erica Miller. I'm a neuropsychologist and psychologist and parenting coach. And so mainly what I do is actually like neuropsych evaluations. So I do a lot of work with kids and their families with developmental disorders, mental health, learning challenges, ADHD, diagnosing it and helping parents actually and schools understand how to best support their kid, right? Like, let's make sense of the behavior that we're seeing in a new way and support the kid in whatever they can be, whoever they want to be, in like happiness, resilience, skill development, etc. And then I do work with a lot of parents, often supporting them with their children. It was like, I did these evaluations and then families were like, okay, what do I do now? Or like, this was really helpful. And now I'm saying, go work with an expert. They're like, we already have a relationship. So those are the families that I see a lot during the day now.
Amazing. Okay, Erica. So we have a question in. We get this question a lot. And it generally goes something like this. Hi, Fresh Starts. I'm newly separated and I'm in the process of divorce. I have 2 small kids and I'd love to make this process as smooth as possible for them. What are some tips for talking to my children about the divorce? Let's hear it. I want to hear everything you have to say.
That's a great question. And I like that you kind of said, I have 2 younger kids, because I think this can kind of vary no matter the age of your kid. But also I think there's some principles that I'm going to share that are going to be helpful, whether your children are 3 and 6, whether they're 10, or whether you have like a grown-up child, right? That is still like your child. And I think the first step is really to ground yourself. Like, before you go into the conversation, it's really important to think about, what am I feeling? What am I thinking? Like, often as like the parent in this, we've had all these like ups and downs, these waves of emotion. We are bringing a lot of feelings to it and a lot of history. And some might be feelings of relief, of anger, of sadness. We might also have a lot of like fear and anxiety around telling our child, like, what is their experience going to be? What are they going to think? And so the more you can kind of ground yourself and tell yourself that you can get through this, right? That this is just like step 1 of a conversation, and that your job here is to share factual information and let your children feel their feelings. Versus, my job in this conversation is to make my kid feel better. that is, I think, like my number one thing, right? Is that being able to provide a space for your kid to feel their feelings. So how do we do this? Let's get down to some more like nitty gritty stuff. I think I would often really start by saying that like all families are different and be very clear and say that, mom and dad, mom and mom, we've decided that right now we are getting divorced. And if you have really young children, saying what that means, we won't be living together anymore. And that we are still a family and we still love you very much, right? You are still a family. This family is still together and in these kinds of ways. So kids are going to have different kinds of questions about that. Am I still going to live here? Where is my bed going to be, right? Some of these questions might be very nuanced and some might be like very practical, right? Will my stuffed animal get to travel with me between houses, right? That is like a question I get asked a lot, actually, with some of the younger kids that I see. So you really want to share as much as you can some practical information about things that are going to stay the same in your child's life and some things that are going to be different and being as concrete as you can. So concrete in terms of this is what divorce means and concrete in terms of this is what divorce is going to look like for you right now. Sharing that this is not their fault at all, right? They didn't do anything to cause this and both parents still love their child, want to spend time with their child, consider their child, the most important part of their family, and that we know that they might have thoughts and feelings about this, and we're here to talk about them whenever that happens. And that's important. Those feelings might be today. Those feelings might be in a week. Those feelings might be in 2 years, right? That you're going to have this open space to really talk to your kids and to really listen to them, whatever they are.
Yeah, they might be in 38 years too. Just throwing it out there for anybody listening. Not that I know anything about that or anything. But okay, I love all of that, and I feel like so my kids were just 3 and 5 when I separated. They were really young, and I love what you said about redefining the family, right? Because that's what we're all about here at Fresh Starts. We're about transitioning to divorce, right? You transition the family, the relationship just transitions. So what are some, I guess, like specific examples you could say as a parent of like things that will not change as a family? Even if like my ex-husband, he moved away, but there were still certain things that we were going to be a family, right? So what are some just like very basic examples of that?
Right. I think that's some things that might not change. We're still going to speak to dad or FaceTime with dad Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 6:15 p.m. as much as that is possible. We are still going to do birthdays all together. And, I don't know, maybe dad's going to be able to come in, right? I think what can be tricky is that sometimes what families think they're going to be able to do at the beginning of a divorce, and I don't know this from personal experience or anything, might change definitely.
Yep.
Right? So being really as honest with yourself, like as the parent going into it, like what can I reasonably offer my child? We're still going to do holidays together, right? And that might change over time too. I think also being really open that you might not have all the answers today and being able to sit with that. I think a lot of us want to give our kids answers. We want to give our kids that kind of comfort in an answer, but also saying this is a really good question. We are going to think about it. We are going to get back to you about it. And maybe even making space for, why don't we write down all of your questions that I can't answer? Because that means I'm taking what you're saying and your thoughts really seriously about this, right? Like they really matter here. You really matter here. And we might not have answers to every single thing today. I think it's going to depend sometimes how early people tell their kids, how much they've thought through before, right? And so, but showing your child, I care about how you think about this, right? This is changing for you, and I'm really like aware of that. And I think, so much changes for the parents in this as well, that it sometimes is hard to factor everything in. But that is a really important piece to let your child know you're really thinking about everything for them. So these are the times that we're going to call dad. These are the things that we're going to do together. But even you're still going to go to your same school. You're still going to see your same friends every day. Your teacher is going to stay the same, right?
Right.
Some of those things can still be really grounding. Yeah, their family's going to change, but some of their daily routines and world around them may not be changing.
I could literally talk about this with you forever because I think it's such an important topic. One more question for you.
Yeah.
My parents got divorced in 1995. There was still a rhetoric of like telling the kids it's not your fault, right? And I never even wanted to bring that up with my own children because I never even wanted to plant that idea into their head. Is that something that we should be avoiding or saying, or where do you stand on that, like, kind of old school concept of it's not your fault that mommy and daddy or mommy or daddy are getting divorced?
Yeah, I think most kids I actually think a lot of kids do somehow think that something could have been their fault. I mean, I think it really depends on what the relationship was like between the parents prior to this, right? Sometimes there are more high conflict kind of families, divorces, situations where kids do wonder, gosh, maybe if I didn't make them yell so much, or sometimes kids can, overhear things. So that may matter. But I'm really a believer that we are not kind of planting these kinds of ideas in kids' head. Meaning, if you said this is not your fault and your child doesn't think it's their fault, they're not now going to start to think,
okay,
oh, wait,
okay,
was it my fault? Right?
Okay.
It's more about the absence of information is actually harder than information in and of itself. So I wouldn't be scared to tell my child something like that with worrying that, oh my goodness, now they might start to wonder, like, why is mom saying that? Maybe somewhere she really is thinking, like, this is my fault.
Okay.
I think we really want to make our children know we love you no matter what. And really, this is about us, right? This is we are the parents making the decision about our relationship based on us, based on really, like, your behavior had nothing to do with this. And I say that, and I think, I don't know your kids, and you know your children, right? You know your boys.
Yeah.
And so if you feel like I have a kid that might maybe be wondering, or I might actually be putting this idea, then I really think you should take it with like a grain of salt and your best judgment about your child.
I love all of that. There's so much to say. If you're talking to a parent that is newly single, what would be just some words of encouragement that you could give to them during this time?
Oh, that's a good question. It is hard. I really want to validate how hard and how much change this is, and how much change it is for like a parent also, even when there might be like feelings of happiness and relief happening, like simultaneously be grieving, and that is okay. To add on to what you might say to your kid, you might not say it in the very first discussion, but you might tell your kid that, this is what's best for your parents or for dad and I. We truly believe that this is what's best for our family. And you might see me having some feelings, meaning maybe mom might shed some tears sometimes or seem a little bit sad sometimes, right? Like, I think divorce is tricky. And I think that even when you're going through it and it's the right thing, there still can be feelings of like grief or sadness of what you thought you were going to have and didn't have. Right, Olivia, Katie, like you. So,
oh my gosh, totally.
So I think just being able to kind of name that for your kid, that like it's not their job to take care of you through that, is an important piece as well. And that everything is temporary in a sense, right? All these changes that you're going through, your children is going to, their feelings, their reactions are temporary. And so it might feel like, oh my God, I don't know that I can tolerate this for the next like 16 years. And I want to promise you that you're not going to have to. Like, everything is going to change. And so I think if you can just kind of try to remember that this is a moment in time, I find that is actually a motto that like really helps me. This is just for now. It's not going to last forever. I can get through this. That is really helpful as a parent. And then in terms of your child, and how to help them, I would really be thinking about for yourself, like, the best thing I can do is let my child feel their feelings. That is the best thing I can do. Let them feel their anger. I don't have to make them feel better about it, actually. That's going to make us feel further apart. That's going to make them feel not heard, right? I think that's where we get into a lot of families, not all the time, but sometimes buying their kids lots of toys, trying to do all these activities. Let's go to Disney World.
Yeah.
By all means, you can do those things, but not to replace them from actually feeling their feelings and experiencing them, right? Like, let them go through the process. Because sometimes, at least this was my personal experience, my parents went through the process of a divorce, and of like working through that this was what they were doing, I think years before they actually got divorced. And by the time they got divorced, for me, it was new. It was shocking. I had no idea.
Right.
And so let your child also kind of go through that roller coaster there.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to influence your decision. You made your decision. You're the parent. You're in charge. And your child is still entitled to go through all their feelings as well.
We're going to have you back on to do a full episode on this, I think, because there's so much to say. Thank you. I think this will bring a lot of solace to a lot of people who are listening. So I really appreciate the time, and I appreciate you sharing this, because it's everything, right? To a parent who's trying to figure this out, is how to protect their kids. And so I just appreciate this, and I know it's going to really heal a lot of people to listen to this. So thank you for being here, Erica.
Thank you for having me, Olivia.
Hi, I'm Alex Phillips, and I'm a licensed clinical social worker and therapist, and I specialize in perinatal women's health and work with women anywhere on the motherhood spectrum, from infertility through parenting.
Okay, so we have a question for you today we get this question a lot, and so we'd love to hear your thoughts. What are some common issues or disputes that generally arise regarding child custody, and how can they kind of be resolved? And I know this is like a very general question, but we have a lot of people who are listening that are going to be going through a divorce, and they probably have kids. And I think a lot of this is just preparing yourself for some of the stuff that might come up. So what do you say there?
Oh, this is really hard for me because a lot of time in my work, we don't always reach a resolution, right? Like sometimes it's just learning to be comfortable in all the uncomfortableness as a therapist. Although divorce is common, I think a lot of the issues that arise in divorce, specifically around children, are so entwined with the parent's romantic and personal history that it becomes so personal, and it's not really common anymore. But I think that there's this like huge overarching theme in divorce, and that a lot of parents struggle with, which is like, who is responsible for what and when, if that makes any sense. And what I end up hearing a lot from friends and clients is that issues surrounding custody really are a reflection of the shortcomings in a relationship. Meaning that outside of abusive relationships, what I hear most is that divorce happens when partnerships break down, when kids become a part of the mix. And this is really specific for women who bear so much of the mental load of parenthood, that there just isn't enough support from their partner. So when you think about it, custody really is just like a legally binding and written agreement of who is taking ownership of what parenting job and when. And I think the tricky part is that a lot of the time, the parent, usually the mom, who is used to making all these decisions, now legally may have to relinquish the control 50% of the time, or less. But I think, like, for argument's sake, let's say 50. And that's really hard, because best case scenario, the uncoupling is amicable and both parents have similar parenting styles. But more likely, there's some sort of contention or different ideas of how to parent. And now you don't have the opportunity to influence what's happening when your child is apart from you. And I'm going to talk more from like the mother's perspective, because I'm a woman and I deal mostly with women. But obviously, this can be true for like
our audience is a lot of women too. So
yeah. So like as a mom, now you're dealing with your child is with your partner in heterosexual couples, mostly men, and you don't have that influence anymore. And the question you're asking is like, what can you do? Your child is apart from you. Like, how do you deal with that? And someone told me once in session that what they do is they just give their child 200% of the love they deserve when they're with them, and or like try to make up for what they think is happening with the other parent. And I think that's the best kind of advice as a therapist I can give, right? Focus on your relationship with your child when you're with them. And do the best you can. As obviously as a therapist, I suggest co-parenting sessions, and I think they're so helpful because instead of focusing on fixing your relationship, you're focusing on how you are going to parent a little person, especially in the beginning, and navigate these separate households to try and create as cohesive as an environment as possible. That makes any sense.
It makes a lot of sense. And we also, we have amazing, there are co-parenting coaches specifically who are trained in like mediation and co-parenting, which I think is necessary. But I also think it goes back to what you were saying, which is every mother specifically who's going through this really should be in therapy, right? To deal with that release of the control, but also how they can show up, like you said, 200%. And also I feel like, and maybe I'm wrong, but like for me, a lot of figuring out custody stuff was really triggering for my own childhood. And so I wonder if you ever get that, like, you know, or see that, you know, women come in with like childhood trauma that then goes into the custody kind of fight or flight feeling when you're dealing with stuff.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's kind of what I was trying to communicate earlier, right? That divorce and custody brings up so many personal history and even personal within ourselves trauma and history, not even in the relationship. So, and a lot of that gets put into the custody battle because it's like that is the biggest decision that has to be made in the uncoupling. Like, who's going to get the kid? How are you going to parent them? Who's going to do school forms? All of these things. And all of a sudden, it's bringing up maybe like who wasn't there for you as a kid, as a parent, or, you know, now you're going to basically be single parenting, even though there's another parent in the mix here. And if you can't provide a certain level of love that you want to because you're also a working mom, what does that bring up in you? And then how does that reflect in how you're talking to your child? I mean, I obviously am always going to advocate for therapy. I see a therapist. I am a therapist.
We love therapy here at Fresh Starts. Yes. I want to go back to a point too. We get a lot of people, and I personally get this message a lot from people that's like, I'm afraid of ruining my kids, right? I'm afraid of, you know, messing up the family and it's going to ruin them. And I really want to hammer home what you said about the 200% thing, because the advice that I give to friends, right? I'm not a therapist, is I feel like it's better to see your kids less and have you a higher percentage of you that's authentically you as a parent, right? Who's not walking on eggshells, who's not, you know, like in this kind of unhappy relationship. It's better to have 100% of you 50% of the time rather than 50% of you 100% of the time, right? Does that make sense, right?
Yeah. I mean, I couldn't have echoed it better. I'm going to try.
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes divorce is the best solution because especially if you have a partner who's not the best parent, you know, I mean, that's maybe not so kosher to say, but, it is better to take care of yourself by not being in a relationship that is dragging you down, is harmful to you emotionally, is maybe abusive, so that you can be there for you 100% and then therefore give even more to your child than to stay in a relationship so that you have a two-parent household and then maybe you're not going to be 100% and your child is going to know that. They feel you, they feel your stress. You know, I'm a mother myself and I have this cold and I woke my son up this morning and he was like, "Mommy, are you okay?" You know, they know. They're so in tune to you as their mom that you have to take care of yourself first. And if divorce is the option, then I think that's the healthiest. And I actually have a friend myself who I was just talking to about this. And she was like, I have so much mom guilt about leaving my child with another parent and not knowing what's happening there. But I know that when they're there, I can be for them when they're with me, that I am now 100%.
Right. Yeah. And I think there's something really beautiful about, being a single mom and getting to like build that relationship with your children in a totally new way. Like my sons and I have a very unique, special relationship that we would never have had because I'm allowed to be myself with them. Right. And I think that there's something so beautiful there. So before we let you go, if there's a woman listening to this and she's going through a divorce, what are like one or two little tips you could just give on like taking care of yourself during this time?
If you can afford it, therapy.
Always
and
therapy.
Always therapy. Um, Take 5 to 10 minutes in the bathroom by yourself. Take deep, really deep breaths. I'm talking like try and explode your rib cage as much as possible. And remind yourself that you are doing exactly what you need to be doing. And that by doing this, your child is going to love you in the future because they're going to know that mom took care of themselves. Or a bath or a shower, anywhere where you can be alone for just
Yeah.
5 seconds, especially if you're still living with your partner,
Yeah.
take the time, constantly remind yourself of that. I hear it from women all the time that they're just so happy they went through with it, even though it was hell,
Yeah.
or they're still going through it with
Yeah, I
custody
say,
battles, whatever.
yeah, the divorce process is never going to be fun, right? It's just not, because legal battles are not fun. Anything legal is not fun, right? We don't like to do our taxes. It's not like divorce is going to be fun, right? But I think, reminding everybody that divorce doesn't ruin, right? Divorce helps, and it can be, like you said, an amazing option. And I think, if you can't remember that, you can come over to Fresh Starts and we will help you remember that for sure. Well, this was really, really great advice. And I just appreciate your wise words. So if anybody would like to get in touch, you can go find Allie on Fresh Starts. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. This was the best.
Before we sign off, a quick reminder. The information shared in today's podcast episode is for general knowledge purposes only. It is not intended as legal advice. We are here to support people through divorce, but when it comes to legal matters, be sure to consult with a qualified professional.
Thank you for listening to today's story. We're always here, and we're so proud of you.
A Fresh Story is produced by Fresh Starts Registry, the first and only platform for everything you need to begin again. You can read the show notes and learn more about today's episode at afreshstory.com.